We are at halftime of the Big Ten and ACC championship games here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everybody being here. We will hang out with you while the marching bands take the field and while the halftime shows do their thing as well. So you can join the conversation for the next 15 to 20 minutes on Michigan, Iowa. Wolverines lead 14-3 at halftime. Wake Forest Pitt 21-all at the half. As expected, those scores pretty much fall in line with what we expected. And of course, the historic SEC championship game with Alabama defeating Georgia. Yes, they did. And they did it quite handily, 41-24. Who counts out Alabama? I posted a video this week of a Alabama-Georgia preview, and that was the first thing out of my mouth. Don't count out Alabama. My goodness, what a game at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium / Georgia Dome, whatever they call it these days. Alabama wins 41-24. So if we're just looking at the playoff scenario as it stands right now, Alabama in as the SEC champion and possible number one seed. Georgia should retain a spot despite a 3-score loss today to Bama as a non-champion, but the most dominant team for the first 12 games at 12-1. Cincinnati, American Conference champion, in a tight game through the first half at 14-13, then broke away with 3 touchdowns in 5 minutes to break open a 14-13 game, make it 35-13. They won 35-20. And so those 3 spots are nailed down. Alabama, Cincinnati, and Georgia. All right, Michigan with an 11-point lead if they win the Big Ten championship. There it is. That's what we've got at the end of the night with all the chaos, with all the scenarios, with all the unpredictability, with 9 teams having a chance coming into the weekend. If Michigan hangs on to this lead, we're not going to have a whole lot to talk about. And I really shouldn't say that because I want you all here to talk college football with me and watch the rankings reveal tomorrow at noon Eastern time right here at the Voice of College Football. So we want to do that regardless. But what do we have to debate? If Michigan hangs on to this lead, wins the Big Ten championship, they are possibly the 1 seed. I would seed Alabama 1, Michigan 2, Georgia 3, Cincinnati 4. But if Iowa, for the first time this season, finds an offense, Hawkeye fans, can you find me an offense? If Iowa can find an offense to match the special teams and the defense that continues outside of 2 huge plays for Michigan, continues to stymie the Wolverines' attack, and Iowa comes back in this game, then we've got quite the debate for the 4 seed. We could go from cut and dry 1 through 4, no debate, to the 4 seed being a debate between Iowa, Michigan, Ohio State, Baylor, Notre Dame. All right, let me get to your comments, and I am not ignoring you. I'm going to the screen that's been moved over here. So let's get to your comments. Dependent Fanatics here and feeling good, 14-3 Michigan. 2 huge plays by the Michigan offense. Cade McNamara threw 1 pick that was dropped, middle of the field. And Iowa, as they typically do, took advantage of a tipped pass, picked off the pass, but Iowa cannot do anything on offense. They're moving the ball somewhat for Iowa. Asterisk for Iowa, they've got about 150 yards of total offense in the first half. For them, that's not too bad. Hey, Sour, YouTube, go blue. See you there. Don, see you there. Keelan, good to see you. Exploring with Ben. And, of course, we're going to be back after the ball game. So after the ACC and the Big Ten championship games are over, right here taking your calls. Matt, feeling good. Go blue. We got this. So it's not a blowout, but Michigan certainly is the better team and has control of the game, much of what we expected. I took Michigan to cover the 10.5 points. I'm fairly confident, although at the same time, they are not putting the game away. Okay, Keelan is saying Georgia should not be in the playoff. So that is a sentiment that I'm hearing for the first time today. I think a lot of football fans just really couldn't believe that Georgia would lose. But now that they've lost and lost by 3 scores, 17 points, they're thinking, okay, we've got these conference championship games. And Georgia's lost this one. And Georgia's schedule was not daunting. So the two best teams that Georgia beat, Arkansas, Clemson. One of those two teams, take your pick. Was it Arkansas? Was it Clemson? Those are the two best teams that Georgia's beaten. They were dominant against a marginal schedule, especially for an SEC team. Beat a lot of okay teams, like bowl teams, South Carolina, Tennessee, Auburn, those kind of teams. Won those games against those kind of teams in blowout fashion, and Georgia was the dominant team. Number one, consensus, best defense in the country. They gave up less than 7 points per game going into this game in the SEC championship game. And now they gave up 41 points in this one. One was a pick six. So the defense didn't give up the 41 exactly. But so Keelan here is, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your first name, either Kellen or Keelan, is going with Georgia not in the playoffs as a non-conference champion. And so I'm seeing that on social media for the first time. I haven't seen anybody bring it up the entire season that if Georgia lost the SEC championship game, should they get in? Cade McNamara shook. Got to play JJ. I'm not really seeing that blank name, but that's how you see it. We've got Don. Mark always coming through, hardest working man on YouTube. Thank you, Don. All right. Perrin, Michigan 28. Sarah's here. Good to see you as well. Iowa defense settled down after the first drives. Our offense needs to get going. And, you know, the play action passes seem to be working. Sam Laporta, get him out in some routes. It was noted during the game a few times that Iowa pounds ahead with those off-tackle plays so that they can run the bootlegs and the play action off of that. That's nice, but if they're living on play action passes, that's not going to get it. Hatley's here. C-Mac needs to play a lot better in the second half. So we're seeing some concerns about Cade McNamara. Yeah, he missed some throws. I don't think he needs to play much better. I think he just needs to protect the football, which he did not throw the interception. He did not throw the interception. And did Iowa pick off the Hail Mary at the end? I saw that there was a Hail Mary and that Iowa may have intercepted the ball in the end zone. Obviously, those type of statistics should be, in this day and age of advanced metrics, I'm sure it's there somewhere. That needs to be added. The interception statistic needs to be changed. It needs to be altered to reflect wide receiver blame, quarterback blame. Basically, Cade McNamara is not thrown an interception today. Yes, Houston did crumble. I never felt as though Houston was going to compete with Cincinnati in that game. They actually competed better than I thought. I did not think twice about taking Cincinnati to cover 10.5. Houston could not just defensively stand up against what Cincinnati brought. Too many explosive plays, too many plays in the open field in which Houston didn't really stand up at the point of attack and be able to fill rush lanes and consistently stop the ground attack by Cincinnati. So big plays by the Bearcats, short drives, quick plays, explosive plays, quick hitting plays over and over. Houston's offensive line could not handle Cincinnati's front. Clayton Tune was under too much pressure too often, and that obviously was an issue, and Houston loses. The Fighting Fickles, good to see you, Mark. Don is saying if Michigan wins, they become number one. I would not put Michigan number one, but I would not mind. I would not. You would not hear a word out of me unless asked, because I think it's debatable. I think it's reasonable that Michigan would elevate to number one. You could look at their their games and their schedule and their wins and compare it favorably with Alabama, I think it's pretty close. I think it's extremely close. Alabama's beaten 2 top 10 teams. They just beat the number 1 team by 17 points. They also beat Ole Miss. Those are the 2 best wins on Alabama's resume. Their loss was to Texas A&M, roughly as good a team as Michigan State. I don't think there's a big separation between Michigan State and Texas A&M. So Michigan loses on the road to Michigan State in a game that Big Ten officials didn't do the best of job there. Alabama loses on the last play of the game. The resumes are comparable, but with that 17-point win in the SEC championship game and the overall strength of the SEC West, I got to go with Alabama as the 1 seed, but have no issue with Michigan being the 1 seed. Blank says, Cade is running out of the pocket when he has a clean pocket to throw from. Klatt was right. Cade missed a possible TD throw to all. Yes, the guy was wide open. He never saw it. Yeah, I understand that. This is not any reason necessarily to pull him from the game, though. If we're pulling quarterbacks who are winning championship games by 11 points in which they're making reasonable throws most of the time, but making a few mistakes, then we'd be pulling games and pulling quarterbacks constantly. Cade McNamara is playing a decent game. Great game, no. Harley is saying that this is Cade McNamara's worst half of the year, which I think shows how well he's played this year. I don't know. I'm not a Michigan guy who's watched every game. I watch all the big games. Can't say I've necessarily seen Cade McNamara play a worse half. Mark, Georgia won't win nothing with a coach named Kirby and a quarterback named Stetson. Go Bearcats. Well, we shall see. Okay, dependent fanatic. Bingo. Let's address this situation. It's not just Michigan. It's all over college football. I think the old adage where a punt returner should set his heels on the 10 and let anything over his head go into the end zone and catch everything at the 10 or in front of him needs to be changed slightly. So it's not the old days. So understand, watch these punters, because there is not a rush on the punters every time like there used to be. There used to just be a set approach, some variation, but basically a set approach to blocking kicks and trying to block kicks. Well, obviously with the penalties in play, coaches are much more conservative in putting on, and with all the fake punts that are being put on as well, coaches of the punt return team are much more conservative in trying to block punts because they're trying to guard against the fake and also trying not to pick up roughing the punter penalties. Okay. So what you often see is that there is no rush on the punter, and the punter catches the snap and waits and waits and waits for his coverage team, waits a beat or 2 or 3, then punts the ball. So routinely now we see punt returners where there is a greater probability by far that the punt coverage team is going to be down there inside the 5-yard line, ready to down the ball at the 1, 2, or 3 yard line. So I don't think the punt returners can necessarily still plant the heels on the 10 and let everything go over their heads, but maybe at the 6 or 7, somewhere in that range should be the new rule of sorts. Because if you're going to catch the ball at the 3 yard line, and Michigan did that twice, and I saw this a few other times today, saw it a couple times in the Big 12 championship game, other games in the SEC championship game. If you're going to catch the ball at the 3 or 4 yard line, you might as well force the punt coverage team to try to down it inside that point, because you've got a better chance of, shoot, what are you going to give away? 2 yards instead of catching it at the 4, they're going to down it at the 2, or you put the pressure on them to save the ball from going into the end zone and getting it out at the 20. Absolutely. So there is a reason, there is a disclaimer there, but there still needs to be some better coaching and instruction and execution about punt returns. Cagenomics, is Georgia's defense not the defense we thought? It is because they play in the East and Clemson wasn't that good. They never really played any playmaking quarterbacks. Hendon Hooker's a good quarterback. They played him. He's certainly a playmaker. He runs for a lot of yardage. He had an exceptional touchdown to interception ratio this year. And with Tennessee's ground game, that is a legit offense right there. Ask Alabama. Ask a number of other teams in the SEC that played Tennessee. Tennessee took Ole Miss to the last play of the game. So that's a good defensive effort against them. Arkansas scores points. KJ Jefferson is a playmaker at quarterback. I'm not selling Hendon Hooker and KJ Jefferson as elite quarterbacks, but I am selling them and should not have to sell them as dual threat quarterbacks who are capable and dynamic at times. Hooker's a guy that's a little bit more reliable. KJ Jefferson, a little bit more explosive, bigger guy who tends to be a more dangerous in the running game, although Hendon Hooker's an explosive quarterback, a guy that's dynamic and has to be accounted for. So I would say that those are the two best dual threat quarterbacks that Georgia's faced this year. Anybody else? Bo Nix. So they have faced playmaking quarterbacks. Now, again, whether you're going to rate those quarterbacks as great quarterbacks, no. But Bo Nix, KJ Jefferson, and Hendon Hooker are playmaking quarterbacks. Eric is asking, if Michigan loses, then should be Big 12 champion. Oh, if Michigan loses, then Baylor should go. Well, then there needs to be a comparison between Baylor and Iowa. And that's an interesting comparison. Iowa does not have a bad loss like Baylor does against TCU. Iowa lost to two good teams, Purdue and Wisconsin. Baylor may have better wins, possibly. They certainly don't have a win against a Michigan. If Iowa would come back and win this game. And the Big Ten is certainly a better conference than the Big 12, but the Baylor wins, since Iowa played in the West and did not play Ohio State, Michigan, or Michigan State in the regular season, we could stack up Iowa's wins, which would be Michigan, Minnesota, Penn State, Iowa State. They both beat Iowa State. Or actually, did Baylor lose to Iowa State? They lost to TCU and Oklahoma State. Baylor beat Iowa State. So they both beat Iowa State. So you've got a point of comparison there between Iowa and Baylor. Eric, I think that's a great comparison, and we'd have to run through the metrics, and that's something that we will do if we come to that. We will look at that comparison between Iowa. It's really going to come down to, at that point, a comparison of Iowa, Ohio State. It really doesn't come down to Ohio State. It comes down, for me, because if you're going to look at Ohio State, then you've got to look at Michigan. And then, of course, Michigan beat Ohio State and would have a better record at 11-2. So Ohio State, if you're going to bring Iowa into the mix, you've got to bring Michigan and Ohio State into the mix, and Ohio State loses that comparison every time. So it's a good point of discussion that hopefully we can have if we've got some controversy, and we will. We've got Cagenomics. I don't see how Bama, after today's convincing win over number 1 Georgia, won't be the number 1 seed. I agree. Double X Buckets for Life says Georgia is still number 1 team. I don't really understand that. Quantum. Hawks need a few big plays in this game is Iowa 24, Michigan 21 final. Okay. That's going to take quite a bit. Don says, I hope Michigan, number 1, Bama 2, Georgia 3, and Cincinnati 4. Then the SEC is not guaranteed a title. Eric likes Baylor over Cincinnati. So I'm guessing, Eric, that if Michigan wins this game, then you're looking at wanting Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Baylor. Got it. And I understand your point. Cincinnati's not played as good a schedule as Baylor. Now they have a better win in Notre Dame, arguably, than Baylor's Oklahoma State win. And Baylor's lost twice, but Cincinnati did not play anything close to the schedule that Baylor did. K-Genomics, I wish Bama and Georgia would play round 1 so the Natty won't be that. Yeah, see, that's the thing. We are going to have our fill of Georgia and Alabama in the next month because this is what's going to happen. We just saw them play today. Really good game until early fourth quarter. And then we're going to see them both play somebody else in the first round of the playoffs. Then we're going to see them play in a rematch in the national championship game. We are all going to get our fill of Georgia and Alabama in the next month because unless I'm missing something and unless I'm off on this, I almost hate to say it, it's going to be predictable. We have gone from chaotic and unpredictable to very straightforward and predictable. That Alabama's going to beat whoever they play and Georgia's going to beat whoever they play, and they're going to rematch for the national championship. Mr. Glasper, I know people that are right there with you, right in step with you, that you've got to win your conference to get into the playoff, and there is certainly a good argument for that. We are lining up for the second half kickoff. I appreciate everybody here. We will be back after the ACC and Big Ten championship games. Let's watch the second half, see how it turns out. And for you rooting for chaos, hope that Iowa can come back. You guys that are rooting for offense and want to see offense, tune on over to the ACC championship game because you got 42 points in the first half and you may have a whole bunch more in the second half between Kenny Pickett and Sam Hartman. But we'll be right back here after the ACC and the Big Ten championship games. We'll see you soon.